"You'll freeze out here, miss," he said, voice low, rough from years of silence. "Ain't my business what you've done." His gaze cut through the white and wind, steady as an old scar. "But I ain't letting you die on my land." And for the first time in a long while, she didn't argue. Wyoming Territory, 1880. The wind screamed across the high plain, tearing at the earth and sky alike. The snow came sideways, cold enough to peel the skin off a man's knuckles. Jonas Hale wrestled the barn door shut against it, the hinges shrieking like a wounded thing. The lock clanged, echoing against the hollowness of the land. For a long time he just stood there, breathing hard, coat heavy with frost, listening to the wind rattle what was left of his world. He'd lived alone for 5 winters now. The first one had nearly killed him. The next 4 had just made him quieter. Men like him didn't talk much after losing everything that had once made them human. He hung the lantern on its hook. The weak glow reached the nearest stall where his mare shifted, restless. He ran a hand along her flank, murmuring something half prayer, half memory. "Ain't nothing out there worth frettin', girl." But even as he said it, the wind changed. It wasn't the howl that caught his attention. It was the space between. A sound small but human, sharp as a gasp. Jonas turned toward the open gap of the door. Through the snow, a shadow staggered. At first he thought it might have been a trick of light, or his mind throwing ghosts at him again. But then it moved, one arm clutched close, head bowed. He froze, then cursed under his breath and reached for his revolver. When she finally broke through the white curtain, she was close enough to see. A woman, thin, pale. Her coat hung off her like old paper torn at one sleeve. She was carrying a small satchel, but her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped it. She stopped at the edge of the corral, half blinded, half dead on her feet. "You'll freeze out here." "Miss," Jonas called out. His voice startled even him. "I ain't inviting you in. I'm telling you to decide before the cold does." She blinked through the snow, eyes wide and dark, as if she didn't understand the words. Then she whispered, "Didn't think anyone lived this far." "Most don't," he said. The wind hit them both, cutting through coat and bone. For a heartbeat he thought she might turn away, that she'd vanish into the white and solve his dilemma for him. But she didn't. She took one small step forward, then another, and collapsed into the drift. Jonas swore softly. "Hell!" He crossed the yard in 3 strides and caught her by the shoulders. Her skin burned cold beneath his gloves. "You got a name?" "Clara," she managed, barely audible. "Clara what?" She hesitated. "Don't matter." He looked down at her face, the kind of tired that went beyond hunger or cold. "Reckon it does if I'm dragging you back to life." She didn't answer. Jonas shifted her weight and half carried, half led her toward the barn. Inside, he set her down beside the haystack and covered her with an old horse blanket. "You passing through or running from something?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out. He didn't press. Not yet. He lit the lantern again and let it hang near her head. She blinked against the light, eyelids fluttering, then sank back into the hay. Jonas exhaled and rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Fine," he muttered. "But if you die in here, don't expect a headstone." She didn't die. She just slept like the dead. Morning came gray and brittle. Frost lined the inside of the windows, and the air tasted like iron. Jonas found her sitting up when he came to check on her. She'd folded the blanket neatly and was running a brush through her hair, slow and careful, as if trying to remember what dignity felt like. "You feed my horses too?" he asked. "They were cold," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Horses live in cold. They don't complain." "Maybe I wasn't helping them," she said softly. That stopped him. He grunted, turned toward the door. "You hungry?" She hesitated. "I can work for food." He rolled his shoulders, half a laugh escaping. "Lady, you're on your last leg." "Then it won't take much work." Jonas stared at her a moment longer. She didn't look like a beggar. She looked like someone holding herself upright out of sheer spite. "Fine," he said. "Come on." The cabin wasn't much. A single room, table, stove, bed, shelf with a Bible and a photograph turned face down. Clara stepped inside, slow, her eyes flicking over everything, as if she were memorizing proof that someone could still live in such stillness. Jonas poured coffee into a tin cup and set it in front of her. She warmed her hands on it before taking a sip. "You don't talk much," she said finally. He shrugged. "Ain't much to say worth hearing." "That sounds like a man who's been hurt. That sounds like a woman who asks too much." Clara didn't flinch. "Maybe that's fair." He glanced up then, and for the first time noticed her face properly. Her eyes were brown, sharp but tired. There was a cut along her cheekbone, half-healed. He said quietly, "You running from a man?" Her jaw tightened. "I'm running from being caught." "Caught for what?" "Surviving." He didn't ask again. When she finished her coffee, she stood. "I'll split kindling," Jonas frowned. "You can barely stand." "Still can swing an axe." He almost smiled, but didn't. "Suit yourself." He watched her go, her figure small against the white light outside. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty. It felt waiting. The next few days blurred together. The storm passed, leaving crusted drifts and a brittle sky. Clara stayed. She cooked what little there was, scrubbed the pans till they shone, and spoke only when she had to. Jonas worked outside most days, but he caught himself watching her sometimes, the way she brushed stray hair from her face, the way her eyes softened when she looked at the fire. One evening he came in to find her mending one of his coats. "Didn't ask you to do that," he said. "You didn't have to." He poured himself coffee. "You always this willful?" "Only when I'm breathing." Jonas grunted, but a faint smirk tugged at his mouth before he could stop it. Later, as they ate in silence, she said, "You live like the world stopped." He looked up. "Maybe it did. You got family." "Had." "I'm sorry," he shrugged. "Don't need sorry. Just quiet." After supper, she stood at the window, looking out into the darkness. "Quiet can be a mean companion." He looked at her, backlit by firelight. Fragile, yes, but still standing. "You learn to live with it, or it swallows you," she said. He didn't answer. But that night, he dreamed of laughter in this cabin, the kind that hadn't lived here in years. On the 5th morning, Jonas went to fetch water and found her at the pump, sleeves rolled up, skin pale in the dawn light. He stopped mid-step. The bruises on her wrists were faint but real, yellow fading into purple. She froze when she saw him. "I can explain," he shook his head. "Don't need to," her voice cracked. "He'd tie me up when I fought back. Said it was the only way to keep me from talking." Jonas looked away toward the hills. "You kill him?" She said nothing. "That why you were out in that storm?" Finally she whispered, "Yes." He nodded once, slow. "Then you did what had to be done." Clara blinked hard, fighting the tremor in her throat. "You don't even know me." "Don't need to. Ain't hard to spot the kind of man worth killing." She turned her face away, but a sound escaped, half sob, half laugh. "You talk like it's simple." "It ain't," Jonas said quietly. "But it's done." She said nothing more. But when he turned to go, she called after him, "Thank you." He stopped but didn't look back. "For what?" "For not looking at me like I'm cursed." He wanted to tell her he'd stopped believing in curses a long time ago. But instead he just walked on, letting the wind carry whatever words were left unsaid. 3 days later, Jonas found the first sign of trouble. Tracks. 3 horses, maybe 4, cutting across the ridgeline just east of his land. He crouched, brushing snow from the prints. They were recent, no more than half a day old. The weight pattern told him the riders were armed. He followed them far enough to see where they veered south toward the main trail. Then he turned back, jaw tight. Clara was hanging laundry near the porch when he returned. The wind played with the hem of her skirt. "You see anyone passing through?" he asked. She turned sharply. "No, why?" "Tracks near the ridge." Her face went pale. "They found me." Jonas set his hands on his hips. "Who?" "The sheriff's men." "They're still looking." You thought wrong," he said, voice low. She pressed a hand to her mouth. "Jonas, they'll hang me." "Not if they don't find you. You can't hide me forever." He studied her, his expression unreadable. "I ain't hiding you. I'm protecting what's on my land." "Difference." Clara met his eyes, searching them for some piece of softness. She found it, faint but there. "Why?" she whispered. Jonas looked toward the horizon. Maybe I'm tired of losing things that don't deserve it. That night the wind rose again, but the air had changed. It wasn't winter cold anymore. It was the cold that comes before something else. Trouble, maybe. Jonas could feel it in the way the horses stamped restlessly, in the way the dogs barked once, then went silent. He sat by the stove, rifle propped against his knee. Clara sat across from him, mending a tear in one of his shirts, the needle trembling slightly between her fingers. "You ever think about going back?" he asked, her eyes lifted. "Back where?" "Wherever you came from," she gave a quiet laugh. "That place burned down the day I left it." Jonas nodded. "Most places worth leaving do." The firelight carved shadows across their faces. They didn't look at each other often, but when they did, the silence between them felt less like distance and more like understanding. Clara set the needle down and rubbed her hands together. "You think they'll come back?" "Don't know," he said. "Men like that, once they smell blood, they circle a while before giving up." "Then maybe I should go," she said. "They'll stop looking if I keep moving." Jonas leaned back, eyes narrowing. "And end up in another storm? Or worse?" She met his stare. "You don't owe me protection." He looked down at his hands, at the scars that mapped his knuckles. "You ain't the first one I didn't save." That silenced her. Outside, something shifted. The faint echo of a horse's whinny carried by the wind. Jonas reached for the rifle before either of them breathed again. "Lamp down," he said. Clara moved quick, snuffing the flame. The cabin sank into darkness. They waited, the only sound their breathing and the wind against the walls. Then came it, distant but unmistakable, the hollow, rhythmic thud of hooves. By dawn, the noise had faded, but Jonas knew better than to trust silence. When the first light touched the ridge, he was already saddling his horse. Clara stepped out onto the porch, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. "You can't go after them," she said. "Not going after," he replied. "Just making sure they ain't coming here." Her eyes searched his face. "What if they are? Then I stop 'em. 3 men against 1? He gave a humorless half-smile. "Ain't the first bad odds I've seen." She reached out, catching his sleeve. "Jonas, don't do this for me." He looked down at her hand. "Ain't doing it for you. Doing it 'cause I don't like being hunted on my own land." When he rode out, the snow crunched beneath the hooves like breaking glass. He followed the ridge for nearly an hour before he saw them. 3 riders moving slow, scanning the valley below. They hadn't spotted him yet. Jonas dismounted, led his horse behind a thicket and crouched low, rifle in hand. He could hear their voices faintly, laughter that carried no warmth. "Said she couldn't have gotten far," one man was saying. "Tracks head this way." "Even if she did," another replied, "she won't last long with him." "Hale's a ghost, ain't he?" The third voice, the scarred one, answered. "Ghost or not, he's got something that don't belong to him." Jonas's grip on the rifle tightened. He didn't like that tone. He waited until they passed, then mounted again, trailing them from a distance all the way down to where the creek split. He watched as they made camp there, unhurried, confident. That was all he needed to see. By the time he rode back, the sun was dipping low, red light spilling over the snow. Clara met him at the fence. "You found them," he nodded. "They're waiting. For me, for whoever they can scare." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He climbed down, his voice low. "You trust me, Clara?" She blinked, startled. "Why?" "'Cause I need to know before what comes next." She held his gaze a long time. "Yes," she said finally. "Then stay close to the house tomorrow." They came at noon the next day. Jonas heard the horses before he saw them. He stepped out of the barn with his rifle in hand, steady and slow. The men rode up just far enough that the horse's breath clouded the air between them. Scarface dismounted, boots sinking into the thawed mud. "Morning, Hale," he said with that same hollow smile. "We didn't finish our talk." Jonas didn't move. "Didn't reckon there was more to say. You got something that belongs to the law. You brought a badge." The man's smirk faltered. "Don't need one to find a killer." Jonas's eyes stayed cold. "You'll need one to bury her. That did it." The man's hand went to his pistol, but Jonas's rifle was already raised. "Don't," Jonas said softly. "Not unless you plan on losing what's left of your hand." The other two shifted in their saddles. "We can take him," one muttered. Scarface sneered. "You think you can keep her hid forever?" Jonas took a step forward, voice low and final. "You're gonna turn those horses around. You're gonna ride south. And you ain't coming back, or what?" Jonas didn't blink. "Or the wind'll be carrying 3 new ghosts by sundown." A long silence stretched between them. Then slowly Scarface backed up. He spat in the mud and swung onto his horse. "You can't keep what ain't yours." "Hail." Jonas watched them ride off, the sound of their hooves fading into the wind. When the silence returned, it felt different, cleaner somehow. Jonas found Clara sitting on the porch, arms wrapped tight around herself. When she saw him, she stood, eyes wide. "You're all right?" He nodded. "They're gone." She stepped forward, searching his face as if not quite believing it. "You ran them off?" "They decided to be smart for once." Her breath came out shaky. "They'll come back." "Maybe. But I reckon they'll think twice." She swallowed, tears pooling in her eyes. "You risked your life for me." Jonas set the rifle down and leaned against the post. "Ain't the first time I did something foolish for someone breathing." Clara took a step closer. "Why?" he exhaled slowly. "Because 5 winters ago, when my wife got sick, I thought maybe if I didn't care about nobody ever again, I wouldn't lose no one. Turns out losing yourself's worse." She covered her mouth, trying not to cry. "Jonas," he looked at her, quiet. "You ain't just someone I saved. You're the proof it still means something." That night neither of them spoke much. The fire burned low. The air between them was heavy, but not with fear, with the weight of everything left unsaid. Clara stirred the embers with a stick, voice barely above a whisper. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Jonas glanced at her. "Used to. Not anymore. Why?" He looked toward the door, where the night wind pressed gentle against the wood. "'Cause every road I ever took led me back to silence. You showed up, and it finally sounded different." Her throat tightened. "You think silence can change?" He nodded. "If it's shared, yeah," she smiled faintly. "Then I'll stay till it starts sounding wrong again." He huffed a soft laugh. Might be a long time. By the next week, the snow had vanished from the yard. Mud turned to grass, and the creek began to sing again. Jonas repaired the fence while Clara washed clothes by the water's edge. She hummed sometimes, and though she never sang the whole tune, he found himself listening anyway. When he came to help her carry the baskets, she smiled up at him. "You ever think maybe we were both meant to end up here?" "Don't know about meant to," he said. "But we did." "That's enough." She handed him a wet shirt. "You sound like a preacher." He shrugged. "Preacher lost his faith." "Then maybe you found it again." He met her gaze, sunlight glinting off her hair. "Maybe I did." April arrived gentle and uncertain, like a child learning to walk again. The valley came alive in slow motion, grass pushing through thawed earth. Birds returning to the pines, the air full of that soft, metallic smell of spring. Clara stood outside the cabin at dawn, watching fog curl up from the ground. The world was quiet except for the creek whispering in the distance. Jonas stepped out behind her, mug in hand, boots scuffing the porch. "Looks like the land's breathing again," she said. He nodded. "Takes time." "Same as people," she smiled, small but genuine. "Then I reckon it's getting there." They spent the morning fixing the corral. The boards were old and splintered, gray from too many winters. Jonas sawed while Clara steadied the planks, sleeves rolled up. Sunlight warming the freckles across her forearm. He caught himself watching her once, and when she noticed, she didn't look away this time. "You always stare like that when you're thinking?" she asked. "Only when I'm trying not to." Her laugh rang bright in the cool air. "You're terrible at it." "Yeah," he said, voice softer. "Guess I am." They worked until the shadows lengthened, then walked back toward the cabin. The sky was pale gold, the air carrying the scent of cedar smoke and damp earth. Inside, Clara cooked while Jonas cleaned his rifle. The sound of the fire blended with the clatter of pans, a rhythm so familiar it felt like it had always been there. "Smells good," he said. "Don't jinx it," she replied. Ain't much left but beans and whatever you caught. Then it's perfect. She looked over her shoulder, eyebrow raised. You must have been starving before I showed up. He smiled faintly. Maybe I was. After supper, they sat outside, the porch creaking under their boots. The moon was a thin silver edge in the sky, bright enough to see by. Clara pulled her shawl tighter. Feels strange, she said, after so much running, like I ain't supposed to be this still. Jonas rested his elbows on his knees. Still ain't the same as stuck. I know. You plan on leaving? She thought for a long moment. I used to think I would. Every time I close my eyes, I still see the road. But lately... She trailed off, then smiled faintly. Lately, I wake up thinking about what needs mending instead. He glanced sideways at her. That's living, not running. She tilted her head. And you? You still keeping your promise? What promise? That you wouldn't save anyone again, Jonas chuckled low. Guess I broke it. She looked down at her hands. You think it's worth it? He didn't answer right away. The wind rustled the grass below, soft and forgiving. Finally, he said, if I hadn't, this place'd still be a graveyard. Now it's something else, so yeah. Worth it, she met his eyes. For a long time, neither of them looked away. The next morning broke clear and warm. Smoke rose lazy from the chimney, curling into the pale sky. Clara was already awake, kneeling in the small patch of garden she'd carved out near the porch. Her hands were buried in dark soil. Jonas watched her from the doorway, arms crossed, sunlight spilling across his shoulders. You plantin' hope out there? He asked. She smiled without looking up. Something like that. Dirt don't care what name you give it. Maybe. But it still grows what you feed it. He nodded slowly, taking that in. Ain't wrong. He stepped out, crouched beside her, and helped press seeds into the ground. They worked in silence, the kind that didn't feel empty anymore. When they finished, she sat back on her heels and wiped her hands. You ever think about what you'd do if they came back? He looked out over the valley. They won't. And if they did? He turned to her, his expression steady. Then I'd stand right where I did before. Difference is, this time I wouldn't be standing alone. Clara's breath caught, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold still. That evening, she cooked supper while he mended the last of the fence. When he came inside, the smell of bread and roasted meat filled the cabin. She smiled when she saw him. You work harder than any man with no one to impress, he smirked. Maybe I started. They ate at the table together, the light low and golden. Outside, frogs sang by the creek, and the night air was sweet. Afterward, he leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, the sound of her humming drifting through the room. You remember that song? He asked. Used to be my mother's. Must have been something to hear. She sang it when she was scared, Clara said softly. Said it reminded her she wasn't alone. Jonas opened his eyes, gazed steady on her. Ain't bad advice. When the dishes were done, she joined him on the porch again. The moon had risen high, turning the fields silver. Place looks different, she said. So do you. That good or bad? He took a long breath. Depends. You plan on staying? She looked at him, smile faint and uncertain. I don't have anywhere else to go. That ain't what I asked. She turned toward the horizon, the last of the sunset bleeding into dusk. Maybe I want to be where I'm wanted. He nodded once. Then you're where you belong. The air went still, the kind of quiet that feels earned. Later she couldn't sleep. The fire had burned down to embers. Jonas sat in his chair by the hearth, head bowed, hand resting near his rifle out of habit. Clara watched him for a while, the rise and fall of his chest, the steady rhythm of breath. She thought about the woman she'd been before the storm, desperate, hunted, afraid of her own heartbeat. And the man who'd once vowed to never save another soul. He had, though. Not with words, but with the quiet way he stood beside her when the world wanted her gone. For the first time in years, she felt safe enough to close her eyes without planning what direction she'd run if the door burst open. She drifted into sleep, the fire's glow warm against her face. When morning came, the world was gold and still. Mist clung to the valley floor, and the sound of the creek carried like music. Jonas was already outside, chopping wood by the tree line. Clara stepped onto the porch, her shawl wrapped tight. He paused mid-swing and looked up. The sun caught his face, turning his eyes amber. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he echoed, setting the axe aside. She walked toward him, slow but sure, until they stood a few feet apart. "Think we might get a good harvest this year," she said. Glancing toward the field, he smiled faintly. "Reckon we already have." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He met her eyes. "You're still here." Her breath caught, words stuck somewhere between laugh and sob. "So are you." "Guess the storm's finally passed," he said quietly. She stepped closer, hand brushing his. He didn't pull away. The wind moved through the grass like a sigh. By midday, the valley shone with light. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the sound of hammering echoed faintly from where Jonas worked near the barn. Clara hung laundry in the sun, the white cloth snapping in the breeze. She paused, looking toward the horizon, the same ridge she'd once crossed half dead. Now it was only another part of the landscape. Jonas looked up from his work and caught her watching the sky. "What are you thinking?" "That I'm lucky," she said. He smiled. "Ain't luck. It's living long enough to see something good stick around." She nodded. "Then maybe that's what I'll do." He walked toward her, stopping close enough that their shadows touched. "Stay?" She met his gaze, voice steady. "Stay. If you'd stood near that little cabin on the edge of the valley that spring, you'd have heard it. Laughter soft as wind through grass. The sound of life finding its way back to what was lost. Because in the Old West, where sorrow built homes and hope built fences, not every story ended in blood or regret. Some ended quietly, with forgiveness, with warmth, and with love that never needed to be spoken aloud.